orientation of the health insurance industry. That's what's going to happen if the Republicans get their way. We'll do everything we can to stop it. And we will also do everything we can to build the American middle class.
Will the gentleman yield?
I would be delighted to.
In addition to that, isn't it also accurate that at the same time that they're cutting Medicare and changing it and removing the guarantee that seniors have known that they're going to have access to that care when they need it, at the same time that they're doing that, isn't it true that they're also continue to protect those subsidies, those billions of dollars in subsidies to big oil companies, and protect tax breaks that ship those jobs overseas that have led in large part to the decline of American manufacturing?
Precisely so. Look at their budget proposal. Their budget proposal says that the oil companies, who in the last 10 years have earned a profit of $947 billion. That would be $53 billion less than $1 trillion in profits. Nearly $1 trillion in profits, and yet our Republican colleagues say they need to continue to be subsidized by the American taxpayers. Hello? What's that all about? You want to balance the budget? Remove those subsidies from the oil companies and let them pay taxes. Why should we be subsidizing the wealthiest industry in the world, the oil industry? That's what they want to do. And you talk about tax breaks. Good heavens. I want to turn now to our colleague from the great city of Detroit. We love that advertisement on the Super Bowl. We now call Hanson Clark the imported from Detroit representative. Please share with us your thoughts here.
Well, thank you, great gentleman from California, Congressman Garamendi. And you're right, I'm born and raised in Detroit, very proud of it, imported from Detroit, as you say. And one reason why U.S. manufacturing has been so innovative is because we use the best research. As a matter of fact, U.S. manufacturing performs half of the research and development in the United States. And it's been fantastic. Let me give you an example. In Detroit, the district that I represent, General Motors Corporation is now manufacturing one of the best electric-powered vehicles around, the Chevy Volt. The cost of the Chevy Volt has dropped. It's very affordable now, and that's in large part because of the Department of Energy's investment into research and development in the lithium-ion battery. The cost of that battery now has dropped down to just $8,000 a piece. So this car is not only a great car, save you gas, it's a good riding vehicle, but also it'll be affordable. But here's the problem. The problem is that many in the majority right now want to cut back on research and development. That's going to be so essential for us not only to build the best products to be sold here, but also so that we can compete overseas. What's very disturbing is that for the first time since 2008, the U.S. Level of investment in clean energy technology has now dropped from first place in the world. We used to be #1 in the world in clean energy technology research until recently. We've fallen now to number three behind China and Germany. That's not acceptable.
Would the gentleman yield for a moment?
Yes, sir.
In the Republican continuing resolution, H.R. 1, they reduced the research budget for energy research here in America, cutting out vital research at the Department of Energy, at the laboratories across this nation. And what are they thinking? I'll yield back to you.
Well, you're right. This makes no sense at all. And I'll tell you what's disturbing is that the British National Science Academy predicted is that if we go on this path that we're going on right now, which we're going to ask the American people to back us up because we've got to put more research and development dollars in building these great manufacturing products. But if we don't do that, if we don't change, China could overtake us in scientific output in just a couple of years. That's not acceptable. We want to make sure that the best products are imported from Detroit, not from China. I yield back.
Thank you so very much, and how correct you are in laying out this strategy of how we can move the American manufacturing industry. Education, a well-educated workforce, research on fundamental issues like energy systems, batteries, transportation, and then making those things in America, importing from Detroit to American consumers and selling around the world. However, when the Republicans put together a proposal such as H.R. 1, their continuing resolution that would cut 700,000 jobs out, it also cut out the research budget for energy research, for battery research, for transportation research, and, in addition to that, research for health. The National Institute of Health budget was decimated. That's not good public policy. We need to make these fundamental investments. And if the Democratic strategy of making it in America is carried forward, Detroit will prosper, and America will prosper. Another part of our country in trouble for manufacturing, but a great manufacturing center of America, is Illinois. Our representative from that great state is here to join us, Jan Schakowsky. Jan?
I'm so happy to join you, and I thank you for coming down to the floor each week and make the point that we have choices in the United States of America. We can put our people back to work. We can reduce our debt and our deficit, but we don't have to do it on the backs of middle-class Americans, and we certainly don't have to do it on the backs of our elderly. And that's exactly what the budget proposal by our Republican budget chairman, Paul Ryan, said, that he said, look, you know, the country is broke, and we've got to just show courage, and we've got to cut that deficit. We agree with that. And the way that we think we ought to do it is by ending Medicare as we know it, by abolishing Medicare. Instead of that guaranteed benefit that all the older Americans can aspire to now, can get when they're 65 years old, that persons with disabilities would get. They know that it's there. And I cannot imagine that there's not every single member of this House, Republican or Democrat, where people come in and say, I hope I can make it till I'm 65 and get on Medicare because I can't get insurance, and even if I could, I can't afford it right now, or I have a pre-existing condition. He wants to do it on the backs of senior citizens. It's been said that many times tonight that 700,000 jobs would be lost if H.R. 1, the top priority of the Republicans, were to pass, that the cuts that it would make, instead of spurring on jobs, creating jobs, putting the 15 million people that want to pay taxes, that's all they want, is to go back to work and actually pay taxes, that would be their dream come true, and it would also cut our deficit. But you know what the American people are thinking? They're thinking, we aren't broke, maybe we are, but not everyone is broke in America. This is a sign that my staff made before I introduced a bill with an idea supported by 81% of Americans that it is time for millionaires and billionaires to pay their fair share. 81% of Americans. That means it's not just Democrats, and it's not just Republicans, it's independents, and I believe that it's Tea Party people, too. They know that they are not getting a fair shake and that the millionaires are. Let me explain. Did you explain the chart? Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, what it says is that from 1979 at that end to 2005, this is the growth in income over certain income categories. And you can see way down at the end there's a little bracket. Even if you can't, you get the idea. There's a little sign down there that says that the bottom 20% of Americans over that period, almost 30 years, their income increased $200. Let's go to the other end. The top 0.1% of Americans, their average income increased, just an increase, almost $6 million. Their average income right now, their average income is $27 million. Get this, the bottom 90% of Americans, I was even shocked by this number, the average income is under $32,000 a year. Top 1%, top 0.1%, $27 million. 90% of the rest of Americans, less than $32,000. This is not good for our economy, and it is not good for our democracy.
Would you yield for a moment?
Yes.
The Republican budget proposal put out yesterday calls for a tax decrease for that 0.1%, from 35% to 25%.
Just the people who need it, right? Just the people who need a tax break. Isn't that astonishing? That they should actually pay less.
We're talking about super trickle-down theory here.
Yeah, take it from Medicare and give them a tax break. And by the way, the top tax bracket in the United States of America right now starts at $375,000. So if you make $27 million or $375,000, you're still paying the same tax rate. What I did was say, okay, let's make the taxes fair. I said starting at $1 million, that's an earning in 1 year, 45% tax rate. And it would ratchet up 10 to 20 million, 20 to 100 million, 100 million to $1 billion, and then $1 billion tax bracket. And you know what? There are Americans who have made $1 billion last year. The top 20 hedge fund managers, an average of over $1 billion a year. One guy made over $5 billion in 1 year. I'm saying those billionaires, that top tax bracket, 49% taxes, and guess what? That is lower than the tax rate in all the Reagan years. I'm under Ronald Reagan's tax, the highest tax bracket. It's fair. This is not about punishment. It's not about revenge. It's certainly not about jealousy. It is about fairness in our tax system. And we would have plenty of money here. We wouldn't have to cut Medicare. Of course we wouldn't. We wouldn't have to cut Medicaid, the poorest people, off their health care. We wouldn't have to threaten seniors with cuts in Social Security benefits. And we could fund those job training programs to put people back to work. We could even fund infrastructure programs that put people on the job, or green energy programs that make America a leader in the world. We could do all those things. We are not broke as a people. So my Fairness in Taxation Act, I hope people will sign on as co-sponsors. 81% of Americans think it's a good idea. We have to have the courage to follow. Listen to people out there and follow.
Well, our Republican colleagues have consistently said we ought to listen. And apparently, from all that we know about tax policy, there's little or no support for reducing the taxes on the super wealthy, but rather they go the other way. And we're wondering what they're thinking over on the other side of the aisle as they continue to skew to create the unshared prosperity by even reducing further the taxes on the super wealthy.
One of the things that they say, that Paul Ryan says, we all have to sacrifice, shared sacrifice. I believe in that. I think that's a good idea. But some people have been sacrificing for a long time. If you drew another line starting at the bottom left and going to the top right of productivity increases in the United States, that line would shoot way up because we have the most productive workers in the world. Productivity has soared. And yet, where have the benefits gone for that, for our more productive workers? Right here. And it's been deliberate, and it's been based on policies that have been passed in the Congress, a partnership between government that's been hand in hand with the wealthiest Americans and the rest of America. And you know what? The other thing is, if you started up here and tracked union membership, you would find that line going straight down. When workers, as 62% of Americans agree is a good thing, have collective bargaining, they're able to help raise the middle class, instead of having a disappearing middle class, which is what's happening now.
And yet we're seeing across this nation a Republican attack on unions, claiming that unions are bad. But the great history of this nation is that the union movement, collective bargaining over these many decades, did in fact create the middle class. And so that in the 1960s was the period of time when the middle class of America was at its peak. It had the greatest distribution of wealth, the greatest share of the income went to the middle class. It was also the time when the union movement was the strongest in America. Since that time, through a variety of governmental policies, we have seen a decline in the union movement and a commensurate, consistent decline in the middle class. We're going to build the middle class. This is about making it in America. This is about rebuilding the middle class. I want to now turn to our colleague from the once and future great industrial center of America, Ohio, and share with us, you've got some specific proposals that you've put forward. I'd like to talk about them. I know that our Congress lady from Illinois has, and I do too, so we're going to talk about specific things that we are going to do to rebuild the middle class by making it in America.
I thank the gentleman and I thank the gentlewoman for her making the case about the fundamental unfairness about what is going on with the proposals coming from the other side of the aisle. And I think that the point that the gentleman just made about the union movement in this country helping to build the middle class and frankly, leading us to a place where we had a strong middle class in this country, you know, it is that middle class that makes America so great, that people have a chance to aspire to that American dream. And so when you stand on this floor, you come here as we do, and you see attack after attack on those middle-class families, from attacks on prevailing wage payments that are just living wages that are going to those folks who work in our trades. And we see those attacks come up over and over again at the same time that those on the other side of the aisle are protecting that huge income disparity. It's really, really hard to take, I know, for us over here, and it's hard for the people that I represent who work hard for a living and are just looking for a chance to take care of their families and make their way. We also see those attacks on collective bargaining to silence workers, to take away rights to even have a voice at the table, to be part of the solution, which they have been and will continue to be. You know, those power grabs, those attempts to disempower ordinary Americans, we have to fight against. And there is a better way. And this Make It in America agenda offers us that better way. Manufacturing, we all know, is a multiplier in terms of jobs. We know that for every manufacturing job, it has a multiplier effect of 4 more jobs, and in some industries, the auto industries, it's as high as 10 additional jobs. We know that where people manufacture, if we manufacture in America, we do research and development in America. We maintain our capacity to be strong as a nation, both economically as well as in our sense of national security. What happens if we can't make it in America? So here we are. We have a number of proposals. We know that we need a national manufacturing strategy in this country. Democrats are committed to making sure that we have one. Another area that we need to work on that I think that the American people, honestly, I think that they expect this, and I'm hoping that our friends across the aisle will see fit to join us in the effort to make sure that when taxpayer money is used to build our infrastructure, which in and of itself puts people to work, we will use that taxpayer money to buy American iron and steel and manufactured goods and get that multiplier effect as we build our streets and our roads and our bridges and our sewer systems and our water systems and our alternative energy products.
Could you just yield for a moment?
I will yield to the gentleman.
There's a piece of legislation that someone introduced. It's called Don't Let American Jobs Go Down the Drain.
They did. And
do you know who that was that introduced that piece of legislation?
Absolutely. I introduced that legislation.
I thought you did.
I thank the gentleman for bringing it up, and it is called Keep American Jobs from Going Down the Drain Act. And what it says, it's very simple. It says that as we do what we need to do in this country to rebuild our infrastructure, our water and sewer systems, that we will make sure we do it using American iron and steel and manufactured goods, because that puts the American people back to work. Other countries have similar procurement policies, and it's way past time that this country also do what it can to keep these jobs right here in Ohio, right here in America.
Well, I love the title, but even more so, I love the purpose of your legislation. Using our tax dollars to build the infrastructure, the water, the sanitation systems that every city, every community needs, and using that money to buy American-made pumps and pipes and fittings and valves and all the rest of the things that go into those kinds of systems. It's not the only place where American taxpayers' money can be used. Let me give you a couple of examples, and this is my pieces of legislation that deal with a similar theme. We all pay gasoline tax and a diesel tax, 18.5 cents on the federal side and 25 cents for diesel on the federal side. Where's that money go? It goes to build our streets, highways, and buy our buses and trains. We need a firm policy that says if it is American taxpayer money, it's going to be used to buy American-made buses, trains, American-made steel, concrete. We need to use our tax money to build the American economy so that we are making those things in America. I'm going to give you the poster child for the wrong policy. State of California, going to rebuild the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, a multi-billion-dollar project. Bids went out. An American contractor came in with two bids. One bid was for steel in America, and the other bid was for steel in China, steel made in China. The Chinese steel was 10% cheaper. The state of California, wrong-headed, big mistake, went out and said, well, we're going to save 10%. Turns out the Chinese steel was defective, the welds were defective, the bridge was delayed, the 10% disappeared, the 10% was added, the American jobs were lost. Never, ever, ever again should that happen in America. If it's American taxpayer money, then by golly, the American-made products. I love it. Don't let American jobs go down the drain. Make sure that we are making it in America. One more thing, and then I want to turn to our minority leader, our whip, to talk about Make It in America. We also use American taxpayer dollars to build the solar systems and the wind turbine systems in America. Are they made in America? They ought to be. There are American manufacturers that make wind turbines and make solar. Once again, our taxpayer money. Is it going to be used to buy solar panels from China, wind turbines from Europe, or is it going to be used to buy American-made wind turbines and American-made solar panels? We must pass legislation, and it ought to be Democrat and Republican alike, that say, finally, it's going to be American-made. We're going to make it in America so that Americans can make it. Let me now turn to Steny Hoyer, our esteemed leader, the whip of the Democratic caucus. Mr. Hoyer.
Mr. Garamendi, I thank you not only for your yielding, but more importantly for the extraordinary time you have invested in educating all of the members of this House on both sides of the aisle in what can truly be perceived, I think, as a absolutely nonpartisan, bipartisan, pro-American agenda that says we ought to make it in America. And if we do, we're going to make it in America. We're going to succeed in America. You've got our logo up there, Manufacturing Matters. I want to congratulate you, and I want to congratulate Ms. Sutton from Ohio, who has been such an extraordinary advocate. Her legislation, in many respects, took the automobile industry and put it back on track. And that was an action that saved literally hundreds of thousands of jobs. thousands of jobs in the automobile industry, but all the jobs that are related to the automobile industry. And I congratulate Betty Sutton for the leadership she showed, and that legislation, of course, was passed in a bipartisan fashion. Not a partisan divide on that issue. Mr. Garamendi has been not only educating the members of this House and, as the American public watches the proceedings in this House, educating them as well. I go all over America and talk to groups, and there is not a group that I've talked to, no matter how liberal, how conservative, whether it's a Democratic group, a nonpartisan group, anywhere in this country, and I've talked to a number of the heads of major corporations, and I've talked to a lot of heads of small corporations, 200, 300, 400 members, and all of them are appreciative of the fact that we have focused the Congress of the United States and the administration and America on the importance of making things in America. And as Betty Sutton, as I walked on the floor, was talking about the kinds of jobs that we create in manufacturing, which have on average a 22% higher salary, that middle-income, middle-class workers, working Americans can have the kind of quality of life that they deserve. And when you see Ford bringing jobs back to America, you see Whirlpool bringing jobs back to America, you see other corporations bringing jobs back to America. Why are they bringing them back to America? Because they are finding out that they get better quality and higher productivity. The gentleman from California mentioned the steel in the bridge that's being built. We make the best steel in America. I was visiting the president of U.S. Steel in Pittsburgh. Extraordinary technology. And we are the most productive producer of steel now. We frankly, in the 50s, sort of rested on our laurels. And then in the 60s and 70s, the Japanese, the Koreans, and others built new plants. And they overtook us in technology. But it wasn't because we couldn't compete. It was that we weren't competing. What Make It in America says is American workers can compete with anybody in the world. And we're prepared to do so. And this Congress hopefully is going to give them the incentives and the tools to do that. And so I wanted to come on the floor and join you, as I have in evenings past, to thank you, because I believe this agenda, if it's known to our Republican colleagues fully and our Democratic colleagues, but much more importantly to the American people, it's an agenda that I have found has the support of 8 to 9 of every American who shake their head and said, yes, that's the deal. I don't mean that the 1 or 10% are against it. It's just that about 85% say, yes, that's what we need to do. America can compete. America can be, again, the center of manufacturing and growth and the creation of jobs. We know that we've lost some 8 million jobs over the last few years, 3 or 4 years. We know that Americans are struggling to find employment. Well, if we want to find employment for them, we need to create jobs for them. We need to focus on creating jobs. And I'm hopeful that as we move on in the coming months that we will, in fact, start focusing on jobs, on job creation. We've created, as you know, 1.75 million new private sector jobs over the last 13 months. But that's not enough. It's progress, but it's not enough. And so I congratulate the gentleman and thank him for his leadership, and I thank Mrs. Sutton for hers as well. Two giants in focusing on an agenda that we call Make It in America.
Well, your kind words are much appreciated, but you're very much a part of this. This logo itself and the theme, Make It in America, was one that you developed, and we appreciate that and value the leadership that you've put into this. I want to turn back to our colleague from Ohio. We have about 7 minutes, I believe, and we're going to wrap this thing up. So why don't you take 3 of those. Mr. Hoyer, thank you very much. I really appreciate your work here. Ms. Sutton, if you'll carry on, I'm going to find one more of these placards.
I thank the gentleman. You know, again, this Make It in America agenda, it really is something that we believe that whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, that everybody can embrace, and frankly, everybody needs to embrace. We saw what happened when we had our economy relying on the financial sector, where you had a few people moving money around, and it wasn't real value that was being created. And when that bubble burst, we had a big problem. But when you engage in manufacturing, you take something of lesser value and you turn it into something of greater value. That is something that we can rely on. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to have a national manufacturing strategy. And in that national manufacturing strategy, like on the agenda, the Make It in America agenda, we need to look at a number of things and how they all work together so that they will support U.S. manufacturing and U.S. workers. And why do we need a manufacturing strategy? Well, it's kind of obvious, but I do think it's worth noting that others have national manufacturing strategies. So Germany has one. You know, South Korea has one. In fact, every other industrialized nation has a network of currency, trade, tax, investment, innovation, and skills policies that promote their domestic manufacturing. So right here in the House, we encourage our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join us in this Make It in America agenda to promote a national manufacturing strategy that deals with trade policies that are fair and that there will be a reciprocity of trade that will no longer leave our workers and our businesses at an unfair disadvantage, where others will be forced to play by the rules in the same way that our manufacturers and our workers play by the rules. A program that also promotes tax policies that encourage manufacturing in this country and stops the outsourcing of jobs overseas, which we have seen take place for decades now. That will be smart with respect to our energy policies, our labor policies. We shouldn't be attacking workers. Workers are not the ones who drove our economy off the cliff. So that whole issue of disproportionate shared sacrifice, right? Just like we saw the disproportionate wealth accumulated in this country as it did with the help of the policies that were promoted by the last Republican administration. We need education policies as a part of that national manufacturing strategy to promote a workforce that will keep us competitive and on top. Policies that protect intellectual property and research and development right here, because where you have research and development, you have manufacturing and vice versa. And, of course, we need to strengthen and rebuild this country by investing in our infrastructure. It puts people to work, and it is what we need to do. Smart cuts make sense, but so do smart investments, and infrastructure is a good way to go. And I yield back.
I'm going to pick up right on the issues that you raised. These are the essential elements of a manufacturing strategy. So if we're going to make it in America, we need to make things in America. And these are the essential things. You talked about trade policies. We cannot continue just to give it all away and just expect to be importers of cheap products made elsewhere. So we need good trade policies that position America's manufacturing sector to be competitive. We speak specifically here of China. A lot of issues involved in China, currency, and it goes on and on. But this is one of the areas where we must stand firmly, or else we will lose it because somebody else is going to make it and ship it here unfairly. Taxes. The tax policy of the nation needs to encourage manufacturing. I want to give two examples that were part of the Democratic agenda, and these are now in law. Last year, as part of our program, we provided a tax break for American manufacturers who invested in capital equipment. We said, don't worry about depreciation. You invest in capital equipment, that is, grow your manufacturing capacity, and you could write off against your taxes in 1 year that investment. That's a tax policy. A second tax policy we said is it's not right for American corporations to get a tax break when they offshore jobs. We said enough of that. No more you're going to do that. On both of these policies, our Republican colleagues refuse to join us. So presumably they want to continue giving corporations tax breaks when they send jobs offshore, and they don't care whether American companies invest here in the United States with capital equipment. Energy, crucial. Crucial. We cannot any longer put our future to risk on international oil markets. We're seeing it today, the extraordinary rise in the cost of gasoline and diesel. Energy policy, energy independence, advanced biofuels, and conservation, electric cars, all of those things. Labor, you talked about labor. Again, it was the labor movement that created the middle class in America by standing firm and saying, the workers of America need to share in the great wealth of America. We've seen the decline of labor, and we've seen the equal decline of the middle class. They go together. Labor, fair labor rules, what's going on in the Midwest, Wisconsin, your state of Ohio, other states is wrong. The labor movement and collective bargaining is crucial to America's middle class because that gives the foundation. Education policy. What in the world are our Republican colleagues thinking about when they cut education funding? If we're going to compete, we need a well-educated workforce, and you can't do it on the cheap. It requires an investment. I use intellectual property here. We could just as easily use the word research. It is from the research that the new products are created. It's in those new products that the great profits are, and it's where we must protect the research. Again, my Republican colleagues, why are you reducing the research budget for America? Why are you doing that when, in fact, that's where the future industries come from? Don't cut there. And finally, infrastructure, the foundation upon which everything moves, including thought. We used to think of infrastructure as being roads, streets, water systems, sanitation systems, yes. And now it's the intellectual infrastructure, the intellectual highway. All of that infrastructure is crucial, and if we fail to invest, and by the way, in terms of the Internet highway, access to the Internet, the United States falls behind virtually every other industrialized country in the world, and in many cases behind developing countries. This is a Make It in America strategy. These are the elements: trade policy, tax policy, energy policy, labor policy, education, research, intellectual property, and infrastructure. This is the Democratic agenda. This is what we're putting forth. This is what we will fight for, because this is how you build the American middle class, by making it in America. I think our time is up. I want to thank my colleagues, Ms. Sutton, Mr. Hansen, who was here earlier, our minority leader. We use the word minority whip now. You were our majority leader just a few months ago, and you will once again be, because this agenda, the Make It in America agenda, is the American solution to our economy and to our economic growth and to rebuilding the great American middle class. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the remaining seconds of my time.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back his time. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Lance, for 17 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I rise this evening in a very sad moment for the people of the state of New Jersey. And I want to thank Congressman Pallone for joining with me this evening, as well as other members of the House, as we pay tribute to our colleague John Adler, who served in this House in the last Congress, an extremely close personal friend of mine, he and I having served 17 years together in the New Jersey legislature. And Mr. Speaker, before I deliver my remarks, we are honored this evening to be joined by the Minority Whip, the former Majority Leader, who certainly knew Congressman Adler well, and I yield time to the distinguished Minority Whip, Mr. Hoyer of Maryland.
I thank my friend for yielding. I did not know that he was taking a special order, but I was here on the floor, went over to say hello to my dear friend, and he indicated that this special order was being taken for John Adler. John Adler died too young. John Adler contributed extraordinarily to his family, to his community, and to his state, and to his nation. He served here too short a time. He was full of energy and of ideas, of intellect, of integrity, and he became a good friend in a short period of time. And I counted him as one of the assets of this Congress. Not a Democratic asset or a Republican asset, but someone who cared about his country and who wanted to see it adopt policies that were productive for its people. And it is appropriate that we remember this too short a life that, notwithstanding its brevity, was filled with great productivity, service, and commitment. And I appreciate the fact that the members of the New Jersey delegation have allowed me to join them, Mr. Speaker, in paying tribute to this great American. And I want to say to his family, I called Shelley the other day and didn't get her but left a message. 4 children are missing their father tonight. A loving wife, whom I got to know as well, missing her husband. And while our loss is certainly not as personal or as keen as their loss, we share that loss in a very real sense. Not only have we lost an American public servant, we've lost a friend and a colleague. And for that, we will say a prayer for his family. And we will be there for his family whenever they need us. And so I thank the gentleman from New Jersey, my friend Mr. Lance, for giving me this time to join him and Mr. Pallone and Mr. Holt in paying tribute to this wonderful human being whom we had the privilege of serving with for too brief a time. And I yield back to my friend Mr. Lance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoyer. Mr. Speaker, I have known John Adler for 20 years. He entered the New Jersey State Senate in January 1992, having been the only Democratic candidate to win an open seat that year, defeating an incumbent in what was not a strong year for the Democratic Party, his party. It was a strong year for my party, the Republican Party. And so he came to Trenton as a phenomenon. He was a very young man. He was born in 1959, so he would have been 32 years old when he became a member of the State Senate. I had been elected to an unexpired term in the General Assembly the year before, and I served in the 1990s in the General Assembly, the lower house of our legislature, and he served continually in our upper house in our State Senate, having first been elected in 1991 and then re-elected in 1993, 1997, 2001, 2003, 2007. He rose to a position of prominence in the New Jersey Senate. He eventually chaired the State Senate Judiciary Committee, which is an extremely important responsibility in the structure of our government in New Jersey. And he was always interested in public policy. The year before he was elected to the State Senate, he had run as an underdog in a congressional race. And although he did not win that race, I think that many took note of his candidacy, and I think that propelled him into our State Senate. I moved from the lower house of the New Jersey legislature to the State Senate in the election of 2001 when we became direct colleagues, and we worked together on many different issues, and he always worked in a collegial and extremely competent fashion. Indeed, we sat next to each other for a period of time of our service in the State Senate. divided only by the center aisle. And to those who know our state capitol in Trenton, the State Senate chamber is a very small room. It was designed originally for 21 members, one state senator from each of our 21 counties. And when the State Senate was increased in population in the 1960s, based upon the principle of one person, one vote, to 40 members, it became a place where it's really quite overcrowded. And so we really sat extremely close to each other in this small chamber, the State Senate. John Adler's career in the legislature was one of distinction. For example, prohibiting smoking in indoor public places and workplaces. He also sponsored an act promoting lower vehicle emissions and an anti-predatory lending act to protect consumers from unfair credit practices. And based on that and many other accomplishments, when he came here, he was appointed to the Financial Services Committee, the committee to which I was appointed as well, and so we became colleagues not only here in this chamber, the House of Representatives, the People's House across the United States, but we became colleagues on the Financial Services Committee. John was not raised in circumstances of affluence. He lost his father when he was a young man, and for him and his mother, it was a struggle. And yet, despite that, he went to Harvard. He was graduated from Harvard College in 1981 and from Harvard Law School in 1984. He was an excellent student. And at Harvard, he met the person who became his wife, Shelley, someone whom I know and who is known by my wife, Heidi, and we consider ourselves to be friends with the entire Adler family. And together, John and Shelley brought into this world 4 wonderful sons, Jeff, Alex, Andrew, and Oliver, all of whom I know. Jeff is at Harvard at the moment, Alex is at Cornell, and they have 2 younger brothers. And tonight, on this sad day, the day when John's funeral took place at Temple Emmanuel in Cherry Hill, we remember prayerfully his wife Shelley and their beautiful sons, Jeff, Alex, Andrew, and Oliver. In 2008, there were 2 open seats in the House of Representatives in New Jersey due to retirements. Jim Saxton in District 3, Mike Ferguson in District 7. John succeeded Jim Saxton, as I had the honor of succeeding Mike Ferguson. So we were the only freshmen in the class of 2008 from New Jersey, and I think that we shared that bond, as of course every member of a freshman class shares a particular and special bond. Certainly, it is exciting for someone to move from a state legislative chamber here to the House of Representatives, and I think we shared that excitement, for example, when we went together to the Harvard seminar that took place for new members, and of course the orientation that takes place here. And when we would bump into each other in the hall here during orientation, sometimes we thought, what were we doing here? An exciting time for both of us. John Adler was a person of enormous wit, a very dry and subtle and sophisticated wit. It really pierced the veil of much of what occurs in public life and in political life, where in so many instances we take ourselves too seriously. That was not Congressman Adler. He has been involved over the course of his life in many different charitable activities. He served on the Cherry Hill Township Council before he went to the state legislature, the boards of the Camden County chapter of the American Red Cross, the Food Bank of South Jersey, the Virtual West Jersey Health and Hospital Foundation, the Camden County Advisory Board on Children. And certainly his respect for the political process is something that we should all recall, especially those of us who had the honor of serving with him in Trenton and in Washington. I believe that those who serve in public life do so out of a sense of a responsibility. John Adler could have made a great fortune in the practice of law, given his native intelligence, given his academic training, given his ability as a speaker. He chose to be involved in public life. In Cherry Hill, a great suburban community in Camden County in southern New Jersey, in the state legislature, where he was very much involved in making sure that the judges who were appointed to office in New Jersey were men and women of ability. We have a system in New Jersey, Mr. Speaker, where our judges are appointed, not elected, appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. And as chairman of the State Senate Judiciary Committee, John was intimately involved in that. The district he served was an interesting district. The only Camden County community in the district is his hometown of Cherry Hill. And he served vast portions of neighboring counties, Burlington County and Ocean County. And to those who are not familiar with the geography of the state of New Jersey, places in Ocean County are among the most beautiful beaches anywhere, not only in this country, but in the entire world. And I know that he had a commitment to protecting our environment. John Adler's life was ended by a bacterial infection in his heart at age 51. His father had died in his late 40s, also based upon a heart condition. So perhaps John Adler had a weakened heart, but he had a very strong heart in his views on public policy, in his views on helping the people whom he represented, first in a municipal governing body, for many distinguished years in our state senate, and in the 111th Congress, where he was my colleague and my friend, and where we two alone were the freshmen from the state of New Jersey. I'm pleased to yield to Congressman Holt.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Lance, and my other colleague from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for setting aside this time. Too young, too soon, not fair, not explicable in a larger sense. It's with great sadness that we come to the floor tonight to honor the life of a fine colleague and a friend, a dedicated public servant to the state of New Jersey, John Adler. John was dedicated to the service of the people of New Jersey. His devotion to New Jersey led him to run for and win a congressional seat in 2008, as you heard from our colleague, Mr. Lance. And while John ultimately was not returned to this body for this session of Congress, his legacy of public service will indeed live on. No doubt, he would have continued to find ways to improve the lives of New Jerseyans. Sharing not only a state, but also a hallway in the Longworth office building here with John, I had the opportunity to get to know him fairly well. He was a wonderful colleague. I will miss, as we all will, his cheerful demeanor and his wonderful sense of humor that he brought to all of his work. A sense of humor, a good spirit in good times and bad. And I'll miss his wisdom and his sharp political insight and his policy knowledge. Today, in a memorial in his funeral in New Jersey, there were several comments made, and I'd like to read a few. His law school roommate and best man commented that John Adler really did believe that worrying was just a waste of time. He believed that any setback was an opportunity for something good to happen. Friends remembered that after he had been defeated, but Congress was still in session for another 2 months, he continued diligently to work here in Congress. As they said, he wanted to make sure that he made it to all of the caucus meetings on time. He wanted to continue to make the right votes for the people of New Jersey. His brother-in-law commented that playing knowledge games against John was like playing against Google. He recalled John's near brush with Jeopardy fame that fizzled after the former congressman paid out of his own pocket to fly for a taping for this television program. He made it to the makeup room, and one of the functionaries asked in a formal sense whether John knew anyone who worked for ABC. John said, well, yes. He thought one of his law school classmates had taken a job with a station, and the producers said that was it. He couldn't participate. Said his brother-in-law, you mean you flew all the way out to California on your own dime? Why on earth would you tell them that? And John replied, because I didn't want to lie. Shelley, John's wife, is an accomplished, lovely person, and there's every indication that their sons are as bright and public-spirited as their parents. This is a real loss for many of us, as well as for the people of New Jersey. I ask that the members of the House join me in extending our sympathy and condolences to John's family and friends and his many admirers. I thank the gentleman for the time, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone, for 17 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to continue making this tribute and joining my colleague, Congressman Lance and Congressman Holt, in this tribute this evening to John Adler, a good friend and one of our colleagues. I don't want to repeat some of the things that my colleagues have already said, but I'd like to talk a little bit about some instances of my own life that also involve John. I think Mr. Lance mentioned how difficult his political life was, in the sense that he was always running in areas that were primarily or historically Republican. When he was elected to the state Senate back in the early 90s, he won in an upset against an incumbent. And of course, when he ran for the congressional seat, which adjoins mine in the south in Ocean County, he was very much running against the odds. That seat had been held by Congressman Saxton, who was also a good friend for many years, that was Republican as far back as anybody can remember. And he still won. I think he had won by 52% of the vote. And he just always faced challenges like that. It was already mentioned about when he was growing up that his father died also of a heart condition at a young age, I think 47 years old. And John, I think, I don't even know if he was in high school at the time. And so he would often on the campaign trail talk about growing up and having to depend on Social Security benefits. And he was able to relate to people because of his upbringing, those who were struggling and those who had a hard time because maybe they had lost a father or didn't have a parent or grew up in circumstances where they didn't have much money. And I think that the energy and the willingness to always take on the fight very much characterized John. And as was mentioned, he really was one of the smartest people that I've ever met. I remember on another occasion when we were at a campaign event and I was introducing him, and I mentioned that he graduated undergraduate from Harvard University and then went on to Harvard Law School, and how impressed I was with that. And after the event was over, he came up to me and he said, "Frank, don't mention that I went to Harvard." He said, "You know, I have to be humble." And that certainly doesn't indicate, you know, any kind of humility if you mention Harvard. Not that he wasn't proud of it. He certainly was, and he had reason to be. But he always wanted to relate to the average person, you know, to the middle-class person, because that was, to the little guy, because that was his upbringing. That's what he was really all about, and that's why he wanted to come to Congress. As Mr. Lance mentioned, you know, anybody who graduates from Harvard undergraduate and law school, you know, could easily spend the rest of their life just making money and doing well financially, but he decided that he wanted to go into politics. He wanted to help people. And even if it meant that he had to run in a district and work hard and raise a lot of money to campaign in order to win, he was determined to do that because he really believed that that's what life was all about, giving back to the public, giving back to his country. I wanted to just mention a couple other things that I thought were kind of interesting. You know, John would always talk about his family. He lived, I don't know how long it takes to go back and forth to where he lived in Cherry Hill exactly, probably a couple hours or a little more probably. But one of the things that he was always determined to go back and forth as much as possible, and even when he was here, in order to make sure that he was able to help his family and not spend a lot of money, he would spend the night living in spend the night in his office because he wanted to make sure that he had enough money to pay for his family. He always talked about his kids. He talked about their education. He was so proud of the fact of, you know, where they were going to college and where they were going to, and talked to me many times about them and their education, and wanted to go back home so he could go to an athletic event with them or just be with them and with his wife Shelley. The one thing that everyone comments about is not only John's humility, but also his sense of humor. I have to tell you that many times I would come down on the floor, and somehow I always remember him over on that, in that set of chairs, or standing up in that part of the House floor. And I would always come up to him and ask him if you know, he wanted to do a 1-minute special order, if he wanted to do this or that. I was always nagging him to try to do different things. And sometimes he would do it and sometimes he wouldn't, but he always would tell a joke and he would always make me laugh. And I have to be honest that oftentimes after a long day here in the House of Representatives, that's really what you need. You need someone to tell a joke or to make you laugh with his wit, with a sense of humor. It was just a very special thing. I'm not sure that I can really describe it well. Also on the campaign trail, John Runyon, his successor in Congress, was here speaking the other night. And you know, you couldn't help when you saw John Adler and John Runyon together. John is this huge guy, you know, football player, big, tall. And of course, John Adler was so slight. I mean, he always exercised. I don't even know how much he weighed, but he was very slight. And the contrast between them was sort of interesting. And John would always poke fun at that as well, the fact that, you know, he was a slight guy and that John Runyon was such a big guy as a football player. I heard Mr. Lance talk about Ocean County and John representing Ocean County. And I can't help but mention one aspect of that, and that is the fact that when he first was running in Ocean County, because I used to represent it at one time, he would remark to me about, you know, how beautiful it was, how wonderful the beaches were. And he was very concerned to preserve the quality of the beaches, the quality of the ocean, and also protect the industries that use it, particularly the fishing industry. is an organization called the Recreational Fishing Alliance that was very supportive of John because he was very concerned about the fishing industry. He felt that it was historically part of Ocean County and part of New Jersey going back to even colonial times, and that he had a special role to play in trying to protect the industry. And they appreciated it. You know, fishermen, maybe unlike some people, if they can kind of see whether you're really on their side and whether you really are truly supportive of them and understand their concerns. And they understood that John did, and they really appreciated all the help that he gave them. I know our time is running out, and so I did want to first recognize my colleague, Mr. Pascrell, and then after that, I wanted to read a statement from former Governor John Corzine into the record because he had asked that I do that this evening. So at this point, I would yield to my colleague, Mr. Pascrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I